Okay. Hi, Joy. So nice to meet you. Thank you for being here. Thank you all for being also here. So I think you know, Joy, but like we have like this live webinar, and for participants or students that cannot join live, the webinar is posted and is uploaded in the course platform. So before I welcome you properly with your bio, I was wondering if you want to try the slides to make sure that everything is working properly.
All right. Let me try that. And thank you for having me, Elena.
That's a pleasure.
Yeah. Can you see my screen?
Yes,
Okay,
perfect.
great.
Okay. So Joy, I can read your bio or you can introduce yourself, knowing that you are the most knowledgeable person of your own life. So which one do you prefer?
Sure, I can introduce myself. That's also.
Okay, so I will give you the whole setting to you. So you have like around 40 minutes and then like 20 minutes of QA. And people will be writing on the chat. And then like after you finish, feel free to, like I will help you and support you, but feel free to start also answering questions. It's a pleasure to have you here and I'll mute myself.
All right. Thank you so much, Elena, for having me. And hello, everyone. My name is Joy Hayley Muntali. I am from Malawi and I'm in Malawi right now. I come in so many hats, but mainly I'm a climate change activist and also an environmental educator. And I am the founder of an organization called Green Girls Platform. That's why we have the beautiful girls on the first slide, where we work with girls and young women in Malawi to address the unique challenges that we face due to climate change. And it was started in 2016 when I was in the university in second year, studying environmental sciences. And after I graduated in 2018, that is when we fully established the organization. But I am also a junior negotiator for Malawi, where I negotiate on climate adaptation and the United Nations Framework on Climate Change Convention. Yeah, so today I will talk about one of the projects that I'm really passionate about. And I just came from a National Youth Conference on Climate Change in Malawi, where we also did a presentation on the project. And so maybe I might be too excited about it because of the insights that I had. But I welcome any questions when I'm in the presentation. If you don't understand anything, please let me know. So our project is called eSTEM for Climate Action by us, Green Girls Platform. And as I already said, Green Girls Platform is a young women-led organization which was established in 2018 with the main issue to address the unique challenges that girls and young women face in Malawi due to climate change. And we started as a safe space where girls and young women could just come, talk about climate change together, and then try to find ways in how we can adapt to the impacts of climate change in different ways. Um, but after so many years of working together, we have tried to find spaces where we advocate for girls, but also provide climate education and girls and young women empowerment, as well as promoting climate justice. And so, just for context, Malawi is in the southern part of Africa. And according to the World Bank, 2 weeks ago, we are now the poorest country on earth. And we have a population of about 20 million people, of which the median age is 17. And of that population, 60% are girls and women. And so, because um, of how small Malawi is, but also the adaptive capacity, young people, especially girls and young women, um, are disproportionately affected by climate change. And this is due to our rise in society, where girls have to walk long distances to fetch water now because of the rivers that were close to their houses have dried up. Or we have to walk longer distances to fetch firewood because we use firewood for cooking and we depend on biomass for cooking as well as heating. And in addition to that, girls are supposed to support their mothers in different house chores that we do. And so with all of this, um, added girls have to take longer time to go to school, and some of them eventually drop out because they feel like they're doing too much and don't have to show up anymore. So, according to our climate landscape, we face different climate disasters, but these ones are the most, I would say, the most intense ones. We have cyclones, rising temperatures, droughts, as well as floods, which lead to failures. We had pests and diseases. We have new pests and diseases now that are newly introduced, and farmers in Malawi do not know how to adapt to them. And we also have waterborne diseases like cholera, which are really prevalent, as well as vector-borne diseases like influenza. And so with all of this, at Green Girls, we started with providing environmental education, just general education, where we talk about what is the environment, what does the environment compose of, and how can we take care of the environment. That was how we had initially started to do our environmental education work. But after noting how we are talking about environmental education, but still there wasn't that aspect of impact. What do we do after we have the education, but then what do we do? And so when we heard about eSTEM, it was a new topic for us, and we were introduced to it by the North American Association for Environmental Education. And we thought this was one of the ways in how we could infuse science, technology education, as well as mathematics in our environmental education to make it something that after we provide education on climate change or environmental conservation, then we can come up with solutions that work in our own context. And so, as a young person in Malawi, I first touched a computer when I was in Form 2, which is high school. Yeah, basically high school. And after that, we only had 1 hour of computer sessions where we would sit in the class and have a computer and work with it. And then after that, we had to go back to class and learn other subjects. But we also had science lessons where we learned about science in different ways and still couldn't know how to use it to come up with solutions. And because of that, and because of that passion, where I had firsthand experience of how hard it is to have access to technology, access to science, even our laboratories would be fully packed, and maybe one of us would have to work with a beaker at the moment, and then you only had 30 minutes of those lessons. And we thought in our environmental education, we had that potential where we could bring in STEM as well as environmental education to find ways to come up with climate change solutions that work in Malawi. And so, because already as environmental educators, there is few of us, and there's at least I think 5 organizations that are working on environmental education, and that is still not enough with a population that has a median age of 17. And so, because of this, there are so many young people where when you talk about climate change, when there are floods and you have to inspire them to go back to school, they tell you we can't go back because what if it happens again next year? Then what do we do? And so we thought, because there is that lack of education that helps inspire change or helps inspire climate action, most of the young people feel hopeless and helpless when it comes to us taking climate action. And so, because I also negotiate on climate change at a global level, we could see what other countries are doing and what steps they are taking to address climate change issues while we still remain using outdated strategies and using things that don't work for Malawi anymore. And so we decided to take a different approach to our eSTEM education, where we work in underserved schools and communities. And most of the communities that we work with are the ones that are recommended to us by the district councils, the ones that don't get enough visibility, the ones that don't get enough exposure to other ways of learning. And so we target young people aged 11 to 20. Although all our programs are targeting girls, we target 80% of girls and 20% of boys and young men to make sure that we're not leaving them behind, and we have everyone that is learning about how to use STEM for climate action. And so in our work, we provide environmental education that integrates STEM for 12 to 14 weeks, where we spend them on focusing on different topics like how can we use science for climate action, tech for climate action, mapping and geographical information systems for climate action, as well as environmental and STEM careers. And so after the 12 to 14 weeks, all our Eastern projects happen for 6 to 9 months. And so we dedicate 12 to 14 weeks for specific lessons and hands-on lessons where we bring in us as well as different partners that are well conversant in the field to provide the education on different topics. And then after the 14th week, we challenge the learners to go and look at their environment, to look at their community and identify a challenge or multiple challenges that are climate or environmental challenges. And then they have to come back and look at all the lessons that they have learned and try to look at what STEM-informed solutions can they implement for a period of 4 to 8 weeks. And so after that, what we do as Green Girls is to provide the resources that they need to implement the project. And then we monitor and help them to also learn from each other. So we take kids from different schools or different communities to go and learn from others from different communities to see what they're doing and how they're learning and how we can improve those lessons. And so what we have seen in the work is that after we started the first Eastern project that was in 2023, we saw how the learners that we're working with were transformed. And at Green Girls, we believe that education is the most powerful thing that we can provide, especially to transform and also to make strides in climate action. So investing in education that empowers communities with knowledge and skills, but also challenging them to look at their own local problems and solve them using local solutions and where they can match indigenous knowledge as well as science, technology, and to come up with climate solutions that work in their context is really important. But we also know that girls and young women experience the greatest impact and receive the least attention. And even in our lessons, we really try to make sure that we have more girls that are taking part in the lessons and understanding what we're doing so that they can go back and ensure that they're using the solutions that work in their own context, because we're trying to make sure that even though they're disproportionately affected by climate change, they can still lead, adapt, and build resilient climate systems that work in their context. And also what we saw after 2023 was that the project is scalable and is sustainable because we are trying to connect indigenous knowledge and STEM. And this is something that is locally grown, where we ask them to implement a project that works for them and see what happens after. And so they're able to teach others, but also educate others on the same. And so some of the action projects that we have seen being implemented are where we had a certain school where the learners thought they needed to educate their friends so they have the same knowledge and they can implement the same structure, the same kind of projects. And so they had planted trees because one of the challenges that they saw was that their school would have soil erosion. And so they planted trees around the school, but also because there are students that wanted to have fruit trees so that they have fruits that they can go back to after a period of time. And so they planted trees, but 2 weeks after, their peers came and uprooted all the trees. And so they thought they had jumped a step, so they wanted to educate their fellow learners to understand why it is important for them to plant the trees, but also why it was important for them to monitor the trees and see what happens after. And so after educating their peers, they asked us if we could do the tree planting again. And we did it with them to see if what would happen after. And what we saw was that they now have an orchard that is thriving. And another project that we did was water quality detection and water level monitoring in one of the rivers that is very prone to flooding in the Longwe district, where we had the learners insert sensors, but also a monitoring system that could send them messages to see if the water level was rising and how they could also monitor that. And so that helped them because during the rainy season, they could tell when floods would occur and also come up with adaptation strategies that they thought worked for their community. And one of the other projects that is really thriving is gardening and composting, where we have learners composting different food that they eat from their cafeterias. And also they can bring food from their houses. And there are some communities that are still doing the same to find ways to have gardens that are thriving. But they're also using sensors to monitor the moisture content as well as to monitor the soil nutrients that are in the soil so that they can help them know what exact plants to plant, but also what kind of vegetables that are in season to make sure that they get the best out of their gardens. And another project that we're doing is biogas production, where some of the communities had a challenge of livestock farming. They have so many livestock. And so when we educated them on that, the role that livestock plays in greenhouse gas emissions, they thought they could help with trying to find a system that curbs methane that comes from livestock to make sure that it's being used as a gas, but also as manure. And so they're using that as well. We have 3 biogas systems that are working in different communities. And there's also recycling and refurbishing of waste, where we have kids collecting the waste and then seeing what they can do with it after. There's some that are refurbishing the waste and then making different ornamental items that we use in our households, and they can sell at the farmers market. And we also have other kids that took bottles and decided to build a library because they thought they needed something, a hub that they could use to have the climate education there. And so they built their own library that has to have environmental education books, and their fellow peers can learn from them. And so they used water bottles, like filling water bottles with sand and then using them as the wall for the library, and then having their fellow friends come to learn about STEM in there. And so far, what we have done is we started in 2023, and our projects take up to 9 months. And we have trained 1,000 young people in the Lilongwe and Salima districts, which are in the central part of Malawi. And we also conducted learning exchanges for all of the learners that we have been working with. We have now established 10 gardens in different schools and communities. And we have 2 community farms that we established. One was established in 2024, and the other one was established towards the end of 2023. And we're in the process of establishing another one in Salima district. So there'll probably be 3 community farms established by the end of this year. And also we have continued learning and passing on of knowledge, where the young people that we're educating are also educating their peers. And now we have an excitement from the areas where they're asking to have more lessons and more interventions happening in the areas, because their peers now are interested to learn about STEM as well. And we have also had really interesting insights on how we can integrate STEM and Indigenous knowledge to develop climate resilient solutions. So in the communities that we work in, we work with the community leaders. And after seeing the integration of STEM and Indigenous knowledge, they asked us if we could also train older people to understand what STEM is, and then use it to also try to find resilient agricultural systems, and how they could also build resilient homes. And so we did that with the older generation and had an intergenerational knowledge where the younger generation were also learning from the older generation. And the other thing that we have seen is that there is more awareness of the power of integrating STEM in climate and environmental education for climate action. Because now we're doing this work and we're sharing it, we have more partners that are interested in doing the work, and others that are interested to see how they can also do the same in the work that they're doing. So we see that as an achievement, because 2 years ago, we didn't have that leeway where we could really feed in STEM into climate action. And we even have academic institutions like Malawi University of Science and Technology that is willing to invest in this so that they can have STEM educators that graduate from their university. And so these are some of the pictures of the work that we're doing in some of the communities that we're working in. And although we've had so many challenges and seen this grow, with so many achievements rather, we have also seen challenges where some of the challenges are that there is the law processes with the Ministry of Education in Malawi. So before we started our lessons, we had sent our materials to the Ministry of Education to check with them if the content that we had could be used in schools. And in communities, but we only got confirmation this year where they approved the content that we have, and we couldn't publish them because we're not approved yet by the ministry. And so even for us to go into schools, we have to consult with the ministry and they have to assign us schools, which can take longer if they're on holiday or if there are other priorities that are happening at the moment. So that has been a slow process that could lead to us maybe starting our projects late and also missing the school mark where the learners have to go on holiday, or we have a rainy season and we can't travel as much as we can. So that has been one of the challenges. The other one has been lack of access to electricity and internet with some of the lessons. So the lessons like technology for climate action, as well as geographical information systems, where you have to use the internet. And because we work in underserved communities, they don't have access to electricity or access to the internet. And we had to maybe download everything before we go, or just try to provide a high level summary of what we're trying to provide. But now we're working with the service providers in Malawi to see if we can get internet to the areas, and also seeing the other alternatives to energy that we can use, like solar energy, or trying to find ways to make sure that we can charge our devices before, so that we can provide enough education to all the young people that we work with. And the other thing is that we have natural disasters that disrupt the residents. So we're working in Salima and Lilongwe, which are prone to disasters, especially Salima district, which is on the lake shore of Lake Malawi, and it floods every year. And when we're hit by cyclones, Salima is always affected because it's towards the lake shore. And so we have to stop our lessons and wait for maybe a month or so to make sure that everything settles down and then we can travel. There's some moments where the roads are fully destroyed and we can go to the field. So those are some of the challenges that we have. And the other challenge is that we have limited funding. Environmental work is already underfunded, but the environmental education work is also overseen as something that is not fully important for Malawi. And the other priorities that are happening, even at a global scale, to ask for education, it is a very hard topic to get funding for, especially environmental education, where you get the impacts are not seen there and then. They may be seen after a year or after some time when you see that the action projects are actually working. So that is also one of the challenges that we have, that we have to work with limited funding to make sure that we can provide the education that we're providing to the young people. And the other one is that we have limited resources. So as I already said, we are the only organization that is implementing a STEM for climate action. But in the communities that we work in, when they see what we're trying to do, then we get more attention and we have more young people coming in. Like one of the projects that we just did in Salima, our target was 300 young people, but we had to extend to 450 because we kept getting more young people interested in the project. And so we had to extend ourselves to accommodate 450. And we only have 10 laptops that we use for our education and 5 mobile phones. And now we had to change the ratio from 5 young people to 1 device to at least 10, to make sure that everybody can see what we're doing and they can fully participate and have hands-on knowledge. So that was also one of the challenges that we had faced. But for what we're doing next, so we have been implementing this project in Lilongwe and Salima for 1,000 young people so far, and we're now doing it for the next 1,000 for the next like the next curriculum year that they open, which starts in September. So we started before they went on holiday. All the schools are closing this week. And so we already started introducing the project, and then after we'll have to pick it up in September after we do our national elections. And so we want to extend the project to educate more young people on how they can utilize STEM for climate action, but also document the work that we're doing, because we have seen so many gaps in the education system where we have young people that are in high school and they fully don't understand what climate change is, or what they can do about climate change. And so what we want to do is to document the impact of the work that we're doing, but also document the gaps that are there so that we can advocate with the government to find ways to make sure that we're providing climate and environmental education for early childhood, but also for the children that are in grade 5 up to grade 8. And also, we want to also document how Indigenous knowledge integrated with STEM can develop climate resilient solutions, because we have seen so many good examples of how we can use Indigenous knowledge and STEM to come up with climate solutions that are resilient and work in different contexts. And so we would like to also document that and see how we can also share that impact and see how other organizations or the government or other practitioners in the field can take it up, but also want to continue doing the project, especially the climate action projects with young people, because some of them have really proven to be sustainable and they're still implementing them. So those are some of the plans that we have, and that brings me to the end of my presentation. Thank you. Yes. So I wasn't fully looking at the chat, but I can check now for questions.
Thank you so much, Joy. I am genuinely impressed of the amazing work that you're doing in Malawi. I imagine that it takes a lot of vocation and passion uh, to enact this type of project, and it sounds beautiful. I personally would like to see a picture of the library made with recycled plastic bottles and like everything about the farm, community farms, everything. It was just so inspiring. So before the Q&A, I just want to acknowledge that and thank you for doing such a beautiful work in your country and sharing with so many people around here. Um, so I would encourage people to continue asking questions. And yeah, and Joey, there are some questions on the chat, so feel free to read them and address them. And I'll be here, and also my colleague Fish, to help you to facilitate anything else.
All right. Thank you so much, Elena, and thank you so much, everyone. And these are really good questions. Okay, so I'll start with the one from Mordecai on GBV. So yes, in Malawi, we have high incidences of GBV. And in our work, we acknowledge that we do that. And one of the reasons why we started Green Girls was to find ways to document the violence that occurs due to climate change. And so when we were starting Green Girls in 2016, one of the issues we noticed was that the number of girls that kept coming to our programs would be lower and lower each after each lesson. And we had to go into communities to investigate what happens. And one of the issues we found was that some of the girls had dropped out because they were maybe too tired to go back to school, which is also a violation to their right to education. They had to walk longer to fetch water, to fetch firewood, and then they wouldn't go back to school. And then another issue that we saw was that some of the girls would be beaten up. And we had at least 3 cases where girls were raped on their way from drawing water, which we also as things that are not really documented. We don't fully talk about, especially with the nexus of climate change and gender-based violence. And so we started documenting this work and sharing it with everybody that could listen to see how best we could find ways to provide empowerment, but also find ways to provide the information resources that are closer to girls and young women so they don't have to walk longer, in ways in how girls and young women could protect themselves and also report gender-based violence issues. And so in our work, we have a specific thematic area on girls and young women empowerment. And most of the lessons that happen there are on providing SRHR lessons, but also connecting the dots between climate change and SRHR to find ways in how we can advocate for girls, but also find ways in how girls have the knowledge on how, when their rights are being violated, they can fully report on. So, and another way is advocating for how best we can document the dots between SRHR and climate change, because that is still the data between on how climate change affects the right to the sexual reproductive health rights of girls and young women is still scanty, and we don't have enough information. So we've been doing our research, but also connecting the dots so that we can fully advocate for that here in Malawi. I hope that answers that question. And the next question is on, I'd love to hear more about how we're blending STEM with Indigenous knowledge and what does that look like specifically? Oh, yes, Mordecai.
Hi. Hi, my name is Kim. I come from South Africa, and I'm so intrigued by what you're doing because I come from the Eastern Cape province, which is very, very impoverished. And I come from a rural area, and we're working with an NGO that does small farm incubation, just to try and help people find a way to make some money to live and grow food for themselves and their families. So we're trying to start an eSTEM program with these children. So thank you very much. I'd love to pick your brains more if there's an email address or something that I could get hold of you, because we're just starting what you've already accomplished. Part of the whole GBV thing is because it is so prevalent here. It's really terrible. It maybe is just a scourge of Africa on the whole. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Kim. And I'm really glad you're also you want to launch this in South Africa. I think it'll be great to also learn from you.
Yeah,
And
well, we ran an event the other day, and it was just so appalling how low the level of mathematics and things like that are. It's almost non-existent. You just kind of don't really know how people are going to go forward in life. You know, not being able to do basic operations and being 12 years old already. So it's a big job. Thank you.
thank you so much, Kim. And yes, I can fully relate to that because the first time we showed, I think one of the schools when we had brought in computers, they all looked at us like, what exactly is this? They didn't fully know what a computer is and how to use it. And they thought it was something really scary, which was something that I didn't expect and something that most people don't expect to see, especially in the 21st century. But yes, I can fully relate to that. And about the question on how we're blending STEM with Indigenous knowledge. So in all our lessons, this is a belief that we have as green girls, that solutions lie with the people and that young people have the solutions to climate change. It's just that maybe they don't have enough access to information on education that can help them to implement the solutions. And so I will give a practical example with irrigation, where one of the areas we're working in, the biggest challenge they have is drought, and they wanted to find ways to still do irrigation even without having enough access to water, and how we could easily do that. And because we're new into the community, we didn't fully understand what irrigation would look like for them. And so we asked them to do their research, to talk to everybody, and then see how they could do irrigation using STEM-informed solutions. And so what the community ended up coming up with is an irrigation system that uses local level pipes. So they have their own, they asked us to buy them pipes that they could draw water from a very close stream and then use it under, they built their own irrigation system. I wish I had a picture so that you could all see what I was talking about, but they had trees and they built like somewhere where we could put a water tank. And after that, because we didn't have access to a water tank at the moment, they got their own like pails. And they had two pails where they filled in water and put them on that elevated stand and drilled the buckets to put in the pipes and then put in different holes in the pipes. And because we have to use like drip irrigation, you have to use 25 centimeters, and we had the knowledge about that, so they could measure like 25 centimeters and then drill a hole, and then they had a whole irrigation system for their community farm. And so what we only provided was knowledge on how we could use like the mathematics of putting something elevated, and then after that, how much long the pipes have to be, and then use it in the different farms. And now they have their own drip irrigation system that works, and we didn't have to buy a whole drip irrigation system. And you could see them tying like the pipes with like strings to make sure that the water stops and the water starts, and then how they could also monitor that the moisture content was fully there. And so that was one of the ways in how they brought in their skills, and we brought in the knowledge that we have and tried to blend it together. And another way where we had indigenous knowledge in STEM was when we had asked for one of the communities, the biggest issue they had was with they didn't have enough manure. And so they knew that they could use animal dung or chicken dung to make sure that they could compost it and then come up with manure. But they didn't know how to do it at a larger scale, where what do you do after? Like, we have manure everywhere, and then after there's some manure that produces liquids, and then all of that, it's very stinky in communities, and they didn't know how to really fully comprehend it. And so when we went in, they were like, we have so much livestock and we have so much manure, but then we only use it for maybe 2 or 3 farms, and then that is it. Well, how do we make sure that we have manure enough for everyone, but also how do we make sure that we're also dealing with the issue of animal dung? And that is when we thought about, what if we could use a system that works? And so when we talked about biogas, we were coming in from the angle of how they could use animal dung to make sure that it's used for something else and it's not as polluting as it is in the community. And what the community decided was, what if we use the animal dung and we still use the biogas for cooking, and we still have we can still use the liquid manure for our farms. And so because they already had knowledge about decomposition and how they could use composting for their farms, when we brought in the issue of the biogas, now they have a biogas system. And everyone in the community brings in animal dung, and they can count that this is the amount of animal dung you brought in, and this is the amount of fertilizer that you get out. And with the gas, they're using it as a community cooking area where everybody can come in to cook if they want to cook something, or where they can share it when they have big, like a big community event. They can use the kitchen to cook, and then everybody else is invited. And we're still trying to explore ways in how they can sell the gas to others that want to use it in their own households. So those are some of the ways in how we're using indigenous knowledge to blend with STEAM, where we ask communities to identify their own challenges and identify their own solutions, and then we find ways in how we can use the STEM-informed solutions for the challenges that they have identified. I hope that answers that question. And on the question from Maria Jose, okay, so the type of curriculum or basic activities done to introduce climate change in the communities that I work. Okay, thanks. All right, so okay, yes, I can share the curriculum, I think, later if that's possible, Elena. But what
Yes,
we do.
of course. Like if you would love to, like, and we can post it in the course platform. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, sure, thank you. So our curriculum is 12 to 14 weeks long, but because we also work with different communities and we're not fully sure about their knowledge level. So before we do any of our lessons, before we have like the curriculum that we're going to use, we do a needs assessment where we go into the community or into the school, and we talk with the learners to understand where they are. But we also we give them forms, and for the communities where young people don't know how to write or how to read, we have to read them out to them so that they fully understand what we're trying to mean. And after we do the needs assessment, then we sit down and we look at the content that we have, and then see how that could work for the different age ranges that we're working with, or the knowledge level that we're working with. And what we have seen, what has really been happening is that communities, especially in communities where we have young people that are out of school, they have working knowledge, which they don't fully maybe utilize, but then they have working knowledge on what climate change is. And they already have working knowledge on the hands-on projects that they can do. And so we see ways in how we can build on that or find ways to integrate some of the topics that are lacking. And then for communities that do not have access to electricity or internet, we try to find the lessons that work for those communities and then work with those and see how we can best provide the same level of education without maybe compromising the quality of the content that we have. And so I can share that later, but before we do the lessons, we have to do the needs assessment to understand the content that we can share with all of the young people that we work with. And I think for the second question on how big our team is, we are like the whole organization, we're 14, but for environmental educators, it's just 3 of us. So we have been trying to, because we're working on different areas, we have other thematic areas specifically for advocacy, and the other part of our team works on advocacy, and the others work on girls and young women empowerment. And so for education, there's only the 3 of us. So we have 3 educators who fully do the work that we do on providing environmental education. But we're working on recruiting more volunteers that we can work with. But so far, it's 14 of us, with 3 people in finance, 3 in environmental education, 3 in advocacy projects, as well as others in girls and young empowerment work. So I saw your hearts, Marie, so I hope I have answered that question. Yes.
Maria Jose, feel free to unmute yourself. Yes.
Thank you. Well, I want to congratulate you. And I texted already, but yes, my friend Dome is also here and we work together. And I'm impressed of all the job that you have done, just being 3 of you. We are 2, and we were like, oh my God, that's so much work. And that's why we were wondering kind of like how to target. So everything is clear. If you want, we could also share emails. We usually also try to do assessments, so don't worry about that. We will know what the kids know before actually trying to implement any curriculum. But I think it's a perfect timing because I didn't, and like our team of 2 didn't have like all the skills of what we could share here, because as the other person that intervened said, like we share that reality with Africa, even though we're in Ecuador, because the education is so poor here in the rural areas that trying to tackle that was like, how I'm gonna teach this if like not even the basic things are known. So we try to kind of like, first, let's try to discover the forest and how the forest works. And then maybe let's try to implement the discovering of the ocean and how the ocean works and why it's important. But we have been not like procrastinating, but waiting for the time to see like, okay, when we can teach the concepts of climate change. And here they are also more vulnerable because we're right next to the ocean. So thank you for being willing to share with us, and hopefully we can use the material to start sharing and doing activities to help target that. And it's an amazing job. I had my eyes with water.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much for your kind words. I can't wait to see what you do with Eastem in Ecuador. Yes. And I think we have another question on integrating indigenous knowledge, the indigenous knowledge component. I hope I answered that one. Yeah. And then the next one is on, do you feel GBV is driven by culture? And I would say yes, because I grew up in a culture that is patrilineal and they value men more than they value girls. And so in all the work that we do, we have had to prove ourselves that we can actually do it. And there were moments when in 2019, we wanted to give up because we were tired of getting blocked from meeting girls and young women in schools. there was a moment when we went to a school and we were sent away because they thought we were prostitutes trying to teach girls and young women prostitution when we were only trying to provide climate education. And we had to find really strategic ways to work with other communities, but in some communities we fully failed, where up to now, those are like communities that fully believe in girls being submissive and girls being like they are. And it's one of the saddest communities to work in Malawi, because even if you try your best, there's still so many policies that they put in place as a community that you can't bypass without being looked at as somebody that's trying to go against their culture. And so in some of the areas that we really found breakthroughs, like there was an area in the center region in Lilongwe where the chief fully believed girls could not teach and girls could not provide education that would help other girls to fully develop. And so there was a moment when he asked me to bring my degree so I could fully show that I was educated enough to educate others. And I had to bring in my classmates that had graduated with their degrees to show him that we had fully graduated as girls and we could provide environmental education. And so just by that and by that situation, and we had to talk to the women in the society to see how decisions are made and everything. And by having those kind of conversations, and he is one of the best community leaders that we work in now because he fully understands the work that we do and he started with us. And he's always encouraging girls to look up to us because of that conversation that we had where we had to do like a mindset changing conversation in a co-creation session where we sat down and we asked him why he thought we couldn't provide environmental education and why he thought girls could not fully become independent or become educators. And in that conversation, that's when we decided to set up a different leadership training for green girls, where we actually bring in other young women into the community so that the girls can see that it's possible to be better, but also to talk about GBV in a way that is unfiltered, because as girls and young women in Malawi were raised to not talk about GBV out like loudly to everyone that could listen, but then find ways in how we can have unfiltered spaces, like safe spaces that are established specifically to talk about climate change and gender-based violence, but also finding ways to protect ourselves, but also finding ways to advocate for others on GBV. So I would say yes, especially in my context, GBV is driven by the culture that we grew up in. And I think the next question is on have you ever tried to evaluate how your STEM initiatives could bring change to girls and use that as a strategy to strengthen your funding? So yes. And that's also one of the things that we want to do for the next 6 months, to fully document the work that we do and show the statistics that we have so that we can get more funding. And one of the ways in how we have seen funding to be when people see the action projects that young people do. There was a donor that didn't believe when we told them that there was a school that was building their own library using bottles. And so they asked us to take them to the school so they could see what was happening. And when we got there, we stood back, like we told them, talk to the kids, talk to the learners and listen to them and see what exactly they're doing. And after that, they asked us if we could document everything, like get the learners to speak, to fully express what STEM is so that others could see that this actually works and this is something that they could invest in. And so that's what we're trying to do, to do an evaluation of what we have done, but also to show the impact of what STEM can do, especially in underserved communities in Malawi, to also build resilient climate systems. And I mentioned that when I was coming into the meeting, I'm coming from a youth conference where we had our learners talk about STEM and to talk about the project to our ministers and government officials and other stakeholders. And now we have another donor that is willing to invest in our project because they have seen the impact that that has on really young children that are not even 15 yet, but they can fully talk about how to use sensors And one of them is thinking of developing a flood warning system where they can warn their fellows in during floods and cyclones, which is some of the ways that we're seeing that those are things that we can document and see how we can also fundraise for the project. So I hope I've answered that question. And so on training older generations on STEM, so the method that we fully used was co-creation. So when we had the older generation coming in and asking how we thought STEM can be met with Indigenous knowledge and how that could work in their context, we asked them to also like to have an open conversation on how we can learn from each other. And so in a certain way, and we have seen that work for us as Green Girls because we are all young women and I think we're all below the age of 30. So we tried to find ways to bring in the older generation to talk to us so we can exchange knowledge. And in those spaces where we sit and we listen to each other and provide feedback, and there were moments when we had to time each other, like everybody can speak for 2 minutes so that everybody has the same access to a platform that works for everyone. And after having that conversation, they saw that what we were doing is helpful for them and what they were doing was also helpful for us. And we found ways in how we can co-create the lessons, but also find ways in how we can provide STEM so that they learn from us. But also the girls learned that climate change is a challenge that spans generations, and there have been other adaptation strategies that the older generation had that maybe with just an aspect of technology, they can be resilient. And so we learn from each other and find ways in how we could help the girls to also help teach the older generation, but also learn from them in a space where you don't feel like you have to get capacity from somebody else or be forced to be in, but rather somewhere where we're all sharing knowledge and finding ways in how we could build our own resilience. I hope that's helpful. And yeah. Okay. Okay. I don't know if I have missed any questions, Elena.
Sorry. Yeah, I think you have addressed all of them. Someone would like to, as we wrap up, is someone else would like to ask a question, like to unmute yourself or to write in the chat. We only have like about 5 minutes left, so anyone else? Fish, can you find? Are you seeing anyone else with hands raised? No. Okay.
Well, I see lots of thank yous. I think it's absolutely inspiring sharing. But actually, I have a sort of a comments or a sort of question to ask Joy, if I may. I feel, yeah, you're doing a really challenging and meaningful job, and I think I have a strong feeling that all the girls and boys in your platform or who have been through the program that organized by your organization, that is a treasure to your community or to your society. I wonder if you have any plan to keep them in your network and to actually, have different sort of way for them to come back and to support GGP and, to contribute and to make this network even stronger in the near future. I know you have been running this organization for over 7 or 8 years, right? I think some of those participants can be very different from when they join your network. So how is your observation over them, and what do you think about this, co-contributing way to build your network?
Yeah, and I think that's a good question. And so when we were starting, it was just me, and then I got 2 of my friends to join me. But what has happened over the years is that in 2020, we started a program to train more girls and young women, like intensely for 6 months, to fully understand climate change, but also the thematic areas on climate change negotiations. And so when we're doing that work, half of the people that work for Green Girls now came from that program because they had seen the gaps that we had and they were willing to work for free. So from 2020 up to 2022, we were all working for free as volunteers to see what we could do together to provide the climate education or climate justice that girls and young women need in Malawi. And so now they are working at Green Girls, and two of them are environmental educators, and three are working on climate advocacy because we all wanted to do something to give back. And because of that mentality, whenever we're doing our STEM lessons now, we ask the learners that we work with that you are supposed to provide this to your fellows that are not in the classroom because we can only maybe take 50 to 100 learners, but it's a school that has over 5,000 young people. So how do we get everyone involved? And we're like, we all are here. This is a privilege. We have this space with you. Whatever we're getting from this, you should replicate to your fellows. And that is also where we're having the challenge of more young people coming in to ask for the education that we're providing because they feel like their friends got the first-hand information and they should all get the same access. But we're trying to provide that space where we have the learners and the participants giving back to the communities, trying to find ways in how the knowledge that I have, I don't just keep it, but I provide it to my next, my friend or my classmates. And so we're using that model to make sure that we have more environmental educators, but also training the educators that when we're doing our education work, we try to provide enough education so that we have others that can also train others. And we have like a trainer of trainers sequence. But yes, we explored that, and most of the people that I work with were initially volunteers or participants at some point that really wanted to give back.
Thank you so much, Joy. Honestly, I think I can speak with I can speak on behalf of all the audience, but we would love to continue learning about your work and knowing how Green Girls platform is evolving. We are it was so inspiring. Like if you have time, you can go within the chat to see how many beautiful comments you have there. Tell to all your team that we are like impressed of the hard work and passion that you put in the work. Thank you so much for this time. I will share the presentation through the course platform. I think your email is there. There are so many people that want to be in touch with you, and feel free to always be in touch with the Civic Ecology Lab team. So thank you so much. Now we are going to switch to Chinese audience where Fitch stay with the Chinese community. So thank you again, and Fitch, I will leave the Zoom call to you.
Yes.
Thank
Thank you,
you,
Joy.